This week's episode of What Grinds My Gears by Bad Teachers is brought to you by Paria Rio Turbio, restaurant located in Rio Grande, Tierra del Fuego province in extreme southern Argentina. Phone number +54 2901 650135. Mention that Bad Teachers sent you and you will get one free beer. Without any further ado.
Estaba sentado un perro, se cayó el perro y a la mierda el perro, y se va la pita. ¡Hey! ¡Hey! ¡Hey!
Hello and welcome to this week's What Grinds My Gears by Bad Teachers with...
Yo, it's me, Humps, in the UK.
How you doing, Humps? How's everything?
Oh, good, man.
Good. Yeah, who do we got with us today?
Well, yes, thank you, Spyro. Yeah. Today it is my great pleasure to introduce Barry Meeks. Barry I have known for a long time here in the UK, and Barry offers extraordinarily interesting insight into the world of education and has helped me very much in managing my frustrations of the education sector. So welcome to Barry Meeks.
Welcome,
Thank you,
Barry.
gentlemen.
Welcome,
It's really nice to be here, wherever here is, wherever
it's a
I
pleasure,
am.
Barry. Yes,
Wherever
you are.
we are.
It's a pleasure. Barry's, I'll let him introduce himself a bit more in a minute, but Barry's background is within business, in advertising industry for many, many years. And then Barry transitioned to the world of education and training. So we'll be interested in your insights. So let's get to it. Let's steam in with a nice question. Barry, you're a bit of this will become more apparent as we go. So you're an expert in the world of digital marketing and digital business, and you don't have a PhD. Do you think, that's interesting, do you think someone in the world of digital business and digital marketing, teaching and training needs a PhD?
If people think he or she needs one, they do. But depends on really who the people are, I guess.
Do you think? Do you think your
it's possible.
Activity? Go on.
No, I think it's possible to transfer the knowledge, whatever knowledge one has, without the PhD. On the other hand, do you have the credibility that people will even listen to you without one?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, a PhD. By the time you've published your research on a PhD in digital business, the thing's already 17 years out of date. So is there an argument for
you'd be better spending those 4 years actually learning the subject?
Yeah, right. I mean, it moves so quickly, the likes of research struggle maybe to keep up in some ways, right?
Well,
maybe
if you're talking about why I do a PhD, the world is divided into two sorts of people, those who have done one and those who haven't. So it's impossible to be unbiased because you're going to be in one camp or the other. I suppose you could have tried to do one and given it up. And maybe they're the best people of all to ask, because they might have made a decision and decided, well, actually, the game's not worth the candle. But I've spoken to lots of people who do have PhDs, and they are amused by my admiration of them. At the same time, they say, you know what? After a certain point, they were going to give it to me. So it's just a matter of ticking all the remaining boxes. And I don't feel that I actually learned anything by that final process.
Oh, that's interesting.
So that's a bit sad, but it's also a bit weird. And there is still that thing, like what school did you go to? I mean, what secondary school? And this snob value of having those magical 3 letters. And let's face it, if you were to ask me, Steve, would I like a PhD? I'd say yes, please. Thank you very much.
Yeah, okay, that's fair enough. Now, look, the reason for the question is we often ask our guests a similar question because they have an education background somewhere, and it's, do they think it's needed? Did they like it? Did they enjoy it? Do they not want it? Do they need it within their sector? So it's that kind of narrative. Now, Barry, tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, let me answer a different question, if I may. Sorry to interrupt. I'd like to have done a PhD in 1 year.
Yeah, okay.
I'm prepared to give up a year. You don't make much money when you're doing a PhD, do you, during the actual process?
No.
So I'm prepared to give up a year to do one, but, maximum 2, and definitely not more than that. Because I'm a busy man. I've got stuff to do. And I always did have things to do, even in the years when I would normally have done one, by all precedent.
Yeah, right. You've always been, ever since I've known you, you've been a busy practitioner, and that's interesting, as well as an educator. Now, you're an interesting background, Barry. So you have a degree, a set of degrees in mathematics, and then you worked in advertising. So you made the transition from the world of advertising and practitioner digital and non-digital marketing activities into education. So tell us why the move from big corporate advertising, I'm simplifying, into education.
Yeah, that's a really good question. It just kind of happened. I found that I quite liked teaching and explaining stuff, and it was around the time that digital marketing was really taking off. And, I think if I'd started in the advertising agency world a few years later than I did, and maybe many years later than I did, I would have gone straight into digital marketing. And, my career probably would have been different. Yeah, one thing led to another, and I eventually made the decision that I could actually make a reasonable living consulting and teaching and training. And that's quite an interesting realization, isn't it? To suddenly think, well, okay, it's like you jump out of a plane and actually you're not hitting the ground. You seem to be flying.
Yeah.
So after a while, I said, well, okay, I actually don't need a job. I'll just keep doing this. And over the years, I suppose it's 10 years now that I've been freelance teacher, trainer, consultant, author, whatever else I am, and of course everything and nothing. But over that time, it's always been juggling. It's always been absolutely no security, and as you say, not the PhD.
Yeah.
Thanks for pointing that out. And also that lack of credibility amongst the people who are career academics, but also a weird admiration because I'm taking the risk of running my own business, which they're not doing mainly.
Can I ask you, Barry? So salary-wise, would you have actually made more money had you had stayed in advertising or education?
Yeah, I think so. I think more money in advertising. Whether I could have stayed in it, is another matter. That world is changing rapidly. And to be honest, I don't actually miss being in the advertising world. I had a great time while I was there. But, these days, I don't know how much your listeners know about the world of big ad agencies, but all the people I know in them are concerned, not only because of the current situation, but in general, long-term trend. Marketing companies are in-housing loads of stuff. And the days of really trusting your agency and paying them appropriately for all that amount of responsibility that they had, I think they're gone. So completely unintentionally, I think I had the best time in the late 20th century, early 21st century, working in ad agencies. And now I have the war stories to tell to the kids and the not so kiddie, the people in their 20s and early 30s. I've been around this business for a long time, and I still actually feel privileged to be able to be still working in marketing, sort of, after all these years. And of course, I do hopefully bring all that experience to my teaching, which I take very seriously.
Yeah, no, that's great. Right, look, I don't have my PhD, just on your earlier point, I don't have my PhD either. But so, we're still recognised as serious players in the great universities that we work at, one in particular that you and I both work at, and we are recognised for what we can do with our knowledge and our skills and our practitioner without the PhD, and that's recognition enough.
Yeah, and I think it's very enlightened of those schools, because if they had a blanket policy, you got to have a PhD to get in the door, they'd miss a lot of interesting people like us.
Indeed, Barry.
Who do actually bring something different to the students. And it's not as if we are teaching people that want to do MSCs and MBAs and then PhDs, career education people. They don't want to be academics. They want to get out into the world of work. So that's what we're hopefully equipping them for.
Well, I think so. And the amount of times I hear students say, "Oh, well, those people with PhDs that can't teach, but that are put in front of them anyway because they've got a PhD." That's always there's a conflict of goals there that universities have.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we all had those people in front of us when we were students. I went to a university where some of the people teaching me were world leaders at what they did, but not necessarily at teaching.
It's interesting. I spent some time on a program at an institution not too far from you. Actually, it only offers postgraduate and has a background in aerospace. And there was it's a super university, and I'll never forget on this program we had one of the top 3 people in Europe lecture us on the studies were in energy management, and this guy was top 3 in Europe. He was educating us on water management as an energy source, and yet he might not have been the most dynamic person, but it was what he was saying. My goodness, this guy knew. But yet the younger people in the group, because I was the oldest in the group by far, he's boring. Oh, he's terrible. It's like, I think you're missing the point. And it's this whole popularity. Do you find that we have to just be, not take ourselves too seriously at the front and dance around like idiots just to entertain the masses?
Well, this is one of the fundamental issues, isn't it? What is the job? What is the teacher meant to be doing? And you can take a number of views, and depending on which establishment you work in, the management will take a number of views, won't they? Like, are we entertaining the students? Well, maybe we are, but is that the main raison d'etre to be there? Are we teaching them, so it's just a straight knowledge transfer from our heads into theirs? Is that what they need? In the internet age, do they need to memorize lots of facts? Hardly, one would think. And are they, the students, the best people to judge whether they've had a good learning experience? Because there is this evaluation culture whereby faculty, professors, teachers, lecturers are evaluated by the students, which is, of course, interesting, but it shouldn't be the only criterion used to judge whether they're doing a good job.
You know what? You would think so. And I also think it's the wrong time sometimes to ask. I mean, I value the education I've had now more than I might have done at the time. It seems, because I understand its value now after its application. Even my engineering teaching at university, I don't recall any of my lecturers being doctors of. They were practitioners of engineering. And now, even now, with looking at engineering concepts, I still remember what I was taught. I'm still able to apply what I was taught. And it's that value I recognize now from that teaching 20, 30 years ago. So,
absolutely.
Asking someone at the end of the course, "Oh, how was it?" "Oh, it was terrible. It was too difficult." Blah blah blah. Well, actually, maybe that's the wrong timing. Spyro, what do you think about that, man?
Well, it is interesting that we have the students rate us. It's basically just a business model, and it's nothing else in my mind. I mean, the current model. Let me ask you, Barry, what has been the most, if at all, the most disappointing aspect of coming into education, leaving industry?
That's a great
You,
question.
it might not be anything, actually. It might not be disappointing anything, but
Well, there must be something disappointing.
well, perhaps.
I think the mundanity of some of the routine work, and there are so many people in the world who have mundane routine jobs, and it's easy to complain. Some people get very little job satisfaction. I must say, in my work, I get a lot of job satisfaction, but there are some parts of it, and you think, wow, without being snobbish, I shouldn't have to do this. Wouldn't it be better if I could spend more time planning my teaching rather than adding up these marks and doing this marking and doing this in extensive feedback and evaluation of the students on relatively minor tasks, all of which is tremendous amount of admin, and depending on the number of people that you're teaching at any one time, it's, I don't think, a good use of our time. So that's been disappointing, I must say. And sometimes the sort of place, as I was referring to before, where the students are customers and everything that any of them says is listened to studiously, as if they can't say anything wrong, as if they are experts full of wisdom, and in fact they are 20-year-old kids still trying to work out what they like in life, and some of them quite lazy and some of them not really very motivated. So to be able to evaluate the experience they've had, I think is asking a lot. And you can ask them what they think and whether they were happy, but it's a question of how much credence you put in that, and whether you make serious decisions about the teaching staff based on what a small number of perhaps dissatisfied students might say. So, I'm not saying necessarily for myself, but I've seen good lecturers and teachers struggle and eventually leave organizations where they were doing a good job and really inspiring some students, just because one or two were negative and the management was paranoid about that negativity, didn't want it on their figures because they're evaluated because on that basis as well. So I think that's unfair, and I don't think it's good education. And I don't know whether it's always been the same. It makes you reevaluate your own education, doesn't it? How carefully did my academics, my lecturers, my teachers going back earlier than that, how carefully did they really do the marking? Or was it a Sunday evening and they wanted a bottle of wine, or at least a glass?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, Barry. But, I trusted my teachers and professors and my lecturers, and when they fed back on the work I had done, I was respectful of their perspective because I was learning from them. I wonder now that this constant challenge all the time is a complete lack of trust in the system, and maybe every system we have to interact with these days, that you should always question your professor because you don't trust them, or you think they've got it wrong, or you have I don't know, an over grandiose opinion of yourself as a student.
Well, I think also it depends on
is.
which institution you're talking about. There is a tradition in certain business schools and universities that's it. You get your mark, and if you're not happy, try harder next time. There are others who are known to be a bit more malleable, and therefore that encourages the attitude of, okay, you don't get the grades or marks you deserve, you get what you negotiate. So don't be a soft touch. A B plus could be an A. Go and see the person, and be a bit of a difficult man, and stir things up and see if he or she is going to bump you up to an A for a quiet life. And that then makes a nonsense of any idea of impartiality and consistency in marking, and that of course leads to grade inflation, which I think we all agree is a danger.
It is a danger, and just in the press here in the UK, within the last 168 hours, we've seen those stories about grade inflation, and now we're seeing some kind of action. Well, gentlemen, if we and our colleagues haven't been talking about grade inflation for the last 15 years. Well, and finally, it's taken some kind of headline on the national
well,
press stage here.
if we could, Steve, let's just talk about that for a bit. It does kind of raise the question of why the grades are being inflated. You could say that, well, the lecturers want a quiet life, so if they give everyone an A, no one's going to complain. However, I don't think that is the case. I think the actual situation is that it's the universities, the schools themselves who are feeling that we want to keep our students happy. We want our students to recommend us to their colleagues, brothers, sisters, their alma mater as a great place to go. And therefore, the one way of doing that is to give them a mark that they're very happy with, even if maybe they didn't quite deserve it. In other words, you reward them, make them happy, and hope that it's going to be good for business.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think this would be a great this would be a great thing to research about. Which factors are really at play here. Is there that? Is it is it individual lecturers? Is it or professors? Is it the university? Do candidates really feel the need to recommend? I mean, if we asked learners, would they recommend something positive just because they got a good grade, or because they thought the teaching was good and they got a good grade, or because they got a terrible grade but the teaching was good? It's an interesting
really good point, isn't it? Because it's very hard to be happy about a place if you didn't personally do well there.
Mike, that's an interesting comment. Do you think maybe learners don't take responsibility for the contribution to their lower grade? For example, I mean, historically, I've got the first time I took an international marketing an exam for a well-known professional provider of marketing services. I got a grade E. I failed the paper, and it made me smile. But
we can laugh about it now.
We can, because I reflect on that, and it's like, well, yeah, okay, I didn't do enough work for that paper, and I was a little bit flippant about it, and that was reflected. Whereas now, what I hear is, I've put hours and hours and hours into this. Well, yeah, but the hours and the hours and the hours don't necessarily. It's some kind of relationship that doesn't necessarily exist, is what you hear from candidates now.
There are a lot of assumptions, aren't there? There are assumptions that I'm a highly intelligent person, and when I apply myself, I deserve reward for it. But what if neither of those was actually true? They're not actually very capable, and maybe they didn't work particularly hard. They just worked harder than they had before because they're naturally lazy. And let's face it, they're not an impartial judge of either of those two phenomena.
Absolutely. But I wonder if we've lost the art of self-reflection in our younger society.
That's very interesting. At every age, maybe reflection.
Age, yeah.
Maybe reflection is a 20th century thing, or before.
It
maybe the internet killed self-awareness.
Yeah, maybe. Oh, we sound like the plot to a Terminator movie. I love it. We became less self-aware. But maybe, Mike, there's something in this, and this idea. I mean, you and I, and of course, Spyro here, as teachers, or having gone through courses that help us to be better educators, self-reflection, using Kolb's model or anybody else's model you want to choose, that self-reflection was drummed into me as an important thing about, maybe the learners didn't learn because you didn't do it properly, Steve. And so I often think about that, and I do have good and bad experiences in the classroom where I think lecturers have gone well or not. They are fewer. The negative ones are far fewer these days. But I still spend time
that's good
reflecting, to know. And I think we all do. I wonder if it's a phenomenon of a younger learning generation now, the self-reflection and what's the word I want? Taking responsibility for one's lack of action, or I cheated, or I got someone else to write it, or this could be sour grapes. You got a crap grade, and actually, what they did, they paid £1,000 to someone to write it. So they're not really angry with you; they're angry at the company that wrote it for them. I don't know. The dynamic is
the essay mill didn't deliver. Yeah,
exactly, Mike.
You've got to get a really good one if you do use an essay mill.
Yeah,
I think it's very true. And what we would like, of course, is for the student to be humble and say,
yes.
I'm not sure I quite deserve that A, but you really inspired me. And if you think I'm worth it, I'll accept it. And I want to do even better next time.
Yeah.
Or the opposite, which was, well, that was a C. And to be honest, I'm not very proud of what I did. It wasn't my best work. You've pointed out all the flaws in my essay, and you've given me some ideas how I could have improved it. And thank you. I'll really do better next time.
Yeah,
and that's a great attitude. Whereas the person that got a C might well in this world come back and say, that was definitely worth a B+. I compared with my mate, and he did very much the same as me. And I've looked at your model answer, and it's almost the same. I think you just don't like me.
I've had that recently. I compared it with someone else. Blah, 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 blah. It was the same as theirs. Well, and then, of course, I had to spend 45 minutes pointing out the reasons why it wasn't the same and it wasn't comparable, because, oh dear, I'm getting anxiety even talking about it.
Well, but it's his real stuff, because it's what educators are judged on. Someone once said to me, all grading is biased. I think they actually said subjective, which is a better word. All grading is subjective. Well, I guess that's a fundamental truth, isn't it? It's a human being's view.
Yes.
Unless it's maths, in which case the questions are right or wrong. And, it's a bit easier.
They are. And of course, in your field of mathematics, methodology also plays a role there, right? So
indeed, but social science, there are degrees of opinion as to how well the question has been answered.
You know what? I absolutely hear you, and certainly in my engineering maths, I could get between 95 and 98%. I never cracked it at 100, but because of methodologies and right and wrong answers, you're absolutely right, Mike. There were set ways of solving problems and what have you, and the best methodologies for that. Whereas, you're right with the social science. Of course, it is subjective. And it is a constant challenge, and I think maybe sometimes learners approach their professors in the wrong way. About not all of them, I think a large majority in some of our worst institutions will get on their soapbox and bang a drum and shout and scream, and I've seen that even recently. That's a pretty terrible university in London. And
that's the negotiation mentality. Like, okay, the grade I'm given is a start point. Now let's talk.
Yeah.
And imagine if 30 students in a class do that. Even worse if it's 60 students in a class. And the best favor that the university or school can do to the lecturer is to say, they are professionals. This is their judgment. You have to accept it. Right. How many have got the nerve to do that?
Very fewer. But, there are some, of course, as you and I both work at a place that does support the lecturer and professor very, very well indeed. And it maintains its reputation around that. And there's strength in that. The whole coronavirus thing, of course, is going to maybe shake a few things out. We've had a guest on recently as well. We talked about the hot list of the 13 universities that might go bankrupt in the UK if these student numbers are significantly depleted. And we still don't know what that 13 is. Just for our American listeners, the Institute of Fiscal Studies here in the UK, which is a think tank, has modelled a 75% reduction in student numbers entering the education system, has identified 13 English, I think they're all English universities, that would go bankrupt without government help should that scenario play out. And some might say, good.
Some might say they deserve to go. They're probably
right.
It's the market forces that are taking care of lower quality institutions.
Yeah.
Or others might say, well, hang on, every child of 18, every young person of that age deserves the opportunity of higher education. And if you haven't got enough schools currently, you need more. That's why in the UK we have a certain number. However, it's very difficult, isn't it? Because the current situation is that parents and students and potential students are thinking, well, is this a good thing for me to do with 3 years of my life and X £1,000?
Mm.
And right now, there's an opportunity of a career with an apprenticeship and a chance to learn a trade and a skill.
That's
And
very
3
attractive.
years
Yeah.
worth of money being paid to me rather than a loan and the debt hanging over my head for the next 10 years.
Yeah. There's a problem, I think, in the UK in and around government policy. Going to university will open the not necessarily so. Some university programs aren't worth the paper they're written on. Some universities are not worth the institutional brand of being a university that they get. And so actually going to university, blah, 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 is actually more of a risk if you're not careful to your future development.
Indeed, and it's so
I think,
difficult for parents to decide because they've all had their own experiences. Well, let's take it for granted they love their children, they want the best for them, and they will even make personal sacrifices if it's financial to help their children. On the other hand, they honestly don't know what is best for their children. You can spend 3 years in a particular subject in a particular university and then be unemployed.
Yeah, very much
Was
so.
that the fault of the decision you took 3 years earlier, or has the economy changed in the intervening period? On the other hand, is there a virtue in learning for its own sake? Are you training your brain? Are you expanding your intellect so that will be a gift that you have for the rest of your life?
That's a great question. Yeah. Mike, I absolutely take that point, and I think that's a really important point to make. Training your brain for education and learning and development across a range of subjects, there are such supreme value in that kind of activity.
Can consider places we work like business schools. Should a business school do economics and finance? Of course. Should they do marketing? Well, I suggest they should, because that's what I teach. Should they do sales? Well, not really sure about that. Is that right? What about leadership? Well, what even is leadership?
Well,
what about any other subjects? What about teaching about London or Paris or Hamburg or Berlin, wherever the school is? What about local history and culture? And you've come to this place for a year or 3 years of your life. Why not learn a bit about it and understand why it's the way it is? And that'll be something that's a gift that you're going to have for the rest of your life. But does that help you get a job? I don't know.
Mike, it's interesting. I wonder whether we should, maybe now much more focus on problem solving, which seems to be missing from some assessments, some programs that I've worked on. It's like, well, where's the problem solving? Where's the applied reality of this learning to solve a particular problem? There seems to be, and I've mentioned it before in these podcasts as well, this idea of overly prescriptive assessments and content that doesn't necessarily allow for a candidate to free think or free solve these kinds of problems.
And these are the skills that the university leavers need now, rather than memorizing large chunks of facts.
Yeah, right.
Because
I would say,
as far as I know, we will always have Wikipedia and Google. Certainly for my life, and maybe for the students' lives as well, or something similar. So retaining large numbers of facts, I'm sure you've discussed this on the podcast, that's a less useful skill. Just like the London taxi drivers don't need to memorize every street anymore, which is sad because it was a wonderful feat and it actually changed the shape of their brains.
It really
but
did.
It's irrelevant in 2020.
It is, Mike, and that's an interesting ongoing kind of challenge. I'm all for, well, look, I tell you what, someone has done it 1 million times on YouTube. Go look at it, but come to my class having knowledge of it, and I'll show you how to use it to solve a problem. That's where I see the value now in marketing and digital marketing in particular, and technology and economics and all the rest of it. The theoretical stuff, the theory and all those kinds of things have been done many, many times, but we're not using it necessarily
No,
in the right
and
way.
I
If
want
we,
my
you know,
students to understand marketing, even if they're not going to be marketers. I make no
hell
apology.
yes,
You're going to
agreed,
be a finance
agreed.
person working in business. You've got to
Yeah,
decide whether the marketing director is wasting money. You've got to understand
yes,
analytics so she can
yeah,
prove that that money you gave her
And
last
we're
year was
back.
actually well
yes.
Okay,
spent.
so I do have a question, actually, Barry.
Okay, Spiro.
With the coronavirus going on now, and we have a lot of schools, probably the majority, which have been online over the past several months, and there's a push to get kids back into schools. I see that in the UK, in Europe, of course, here in North America. And there's sort of a force coming both sides, whether the kids should go to school, whether they should just stay home and do the online learning. Obviously, it depends on the region, the country, and the city that you're in. Here's my question, though, for you. Do you think there's going to be, or perhaps there is, a greater appreciation for teachers and professors this year because of coronavirus? And the reason I'm asking that is because there's a lot of teachers, kindergarten through 12th grade and tertiary education as well, who, for example, here in North America, they're refusing to go back to work because perhaps, you know, a 60-year-old woman or male, and here you are in a room with another 30, 40, let's say 19-year-olds, and young people aren't exactly, you know, universities and schools in general are sort of a breeding ground for viruses. So do you think there is or going to be a greater appreciation for teachers because of what's going on?
I think the fact that parents have had to do a bit of homeschooling hasn't done any harm for the respect in which educators are held. You know, it's maybe not as easy as people might have been thinking. It's hard work. You've got to be inspirational. You've got to be professional. You've got to entertain and hold the attention whilst hopefully transferring some useful knowledge. So I think there's that. Also, I think, you know, there is a legitimate concern. Who are the most at risk in society? Well, it's older members of society, and that pretty much fits a lot of faculty, a lot of educators, a lot of teachers. And yeah, I mean, if one of the kids has got a cold, you tend to get a cold. But if it's more serious than the cold, you tend to get something more serious. So, you know, I think the people keep talking about return to normality, and yet at the same time, in the same breath, people are saying whatever that is, implying that they know full well it is not going to be the same. So, you know, normal is a relative term, isn't it? Maybe things are going to be different. I think, you know, the question I thought you were going to ask, Spiro, was, is face-to-face teaching so much better than online teaching?
Well, that's
If
another
I,
question that grows out of that, actually,
if
because
I could answer that secondary question.
that's been assumpted from what's been going on this year. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I think so many people have learned, and of course, as educators, we love people to learn anything almost, and including us, we have learned by doing, and one can definitely learn at any age, and however much experience you've got, something different can still represent a challenge. And I think pretty much every educator who's tried to teach via Zoom or Teams or another online platform has found that they get better at doing it through necessity. But also, it's quite interesting, isn't it? You know, you can learn from each other, you can share best practice, and it makes you wonder whether all that time spent on planes and trains and driving cars was actually necessary. I
That's a
think
great
this goes beyond education, you know, into
yeah.
the structure of our
Do,
society. It has implications for property values, real estate, and also for the layout of towns and cities and suburbs. Do
Yeah.
we all need to be migrating into one physical place where we can all congregate together every single day, Monday to Friday, and then the weekend we scatter? Maybe the future is going to be more complex than that.
do you
You
have
know,
any
I think.
reservations of
Oh,
coming into this fall semester, or maybe some colleagues of yours?
yeah, I mean, I think there's legitimate concern. Some people are either shielding themselves or they're living with someone who is shielding. And of course, some people have got underlying health conditions that make them susceptible. And the majority of people will be absolutely fine. You know, plenty of people have caught the virus and recovered from it fairly quickly. What we don't even know is whether they have antibodies that mean they won't catch it again. So there's so much uncertainty from the medical experts in every country. I don't think anyone really knows where we'll be in 6 months or even a year. And, I don't think normal is going to be the old normal, whatever happens. But on the other hand, we've got to face the world as it is. People still need to learn. People still need to be taught. People still need to be equipped for jobs and for driving the economy forward. So educators are going to be a key part of that, as you always have been.
Great.
So
I'm done with questions on my part. Humps, unless you have another question, we can go into
there's
Barry,
no follow-ups. Let's do this crazy thing, man.
So Barry, we do this segment here every week on our podcast. It's called Fire di Buzzatora. It's Greek. It means basically eat the dick now, which means you have two bad choices in front of you, two bad scenarios. You have to choose one of the two. So
the lesser of two evils.
What you feel is the lesser of two evils. Yes.
What you feel is, yeah. They're both evil, Barry. They're both evil. Let me tell you that now.
And what happens if I get it wrong? Does it happen to me?
No.
You will be judged. You will be judged for eternity by your peers.
As long as it's not like a student evaluation, nothing can be as bad as that.
Okay, so this week's Eat the Dick is... Here's the first scenario. Every time you have a serious conversation, you must do so with an over-the-top Italian accent you cannot explain. That's the first scenario. The second, that's actually hilarious. That is hilarious. Okay,
I can't possibly do that. Oh, God, go on.
Okay, and the second scenario is you must ask someone to repeat what they've said as if you didn't hear it 17 times per day.
Do I have to decide now, immediately?
Yes.
You're putting pressure on me. I'm under the hammer.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that? I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
That's 16 left, Spyro.
A sprinkling of wit right there.
Okay, well, I've been taught about inclusivity and diversity, so doing an Italian accent would make me feel uncomfortable. Definitely would make an Italian feel uncomfortable if they heard it. So I'm going to go for the 17 times. I was hoping it might be like 7 times. That would be enough. But if you've said 17, that's what it's going to be. And the person might hit me or shout very loudly. I guess I have to live with that, yeah?
Well, I'm with Mr. Meeks on this. No question about it. I need the 17 times. What did you say? I can do that, man. I can't be doing the Italian accent with any serious amount of face on me at all. So I'm with the big man here. I'm with Barry. It's
17 times. It's not many. You could probably do that within an hour, and then the rest of your day would be normal.
Is it 17 times to the same person? That would be very funny.
It was
but that would be
an aggregate 17. Yeah,
that would be even funnier if it was. Choose one person and do it.
It kind of depends who it is, don't you think? I mean, it's not very funny if they decide to hit you.
You know, guys, I'm actually going to go, and there's a reason for this. I am Greek, and I think I might be able to pull off the Italian accent.
Oh, good grief.
So,
depending on whether you were speaking to an Italian, I don't think you can get away with it with the real Italian.
Controversial. I tell you, just thank you for that, Barry. Just to end, I see that Tom Hanks and Rita Wilson will be speaking Greek soon. Do you see this story? They've become they've just got their Greek nationality. Maybe
Tom Hanks with Rita Wilson. Yeah.
I think plenty of Brits want an EU passport at the moment.
Too true. Well, it's been a pleasure, Barry. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
It's actually been an honor, I must say, and thank you for having me.
No, it's our pleasure. Absolutely, Barry.
Thank you very much.
And we look forward to seeing you and hearing from you again in the future on more educational related explosive topics that are going to come out of our online education system as we move forward. I'm sure. See you soon.
Thank
you,
Thanks,
guys.
Spiro.
Bye.
Take care,
Say
guys.
bye. See
Bye-bye.
you. Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.